Sports Radio. This is the Zach Gelb Show. Welcome in to the Corner 3, taking you around the arc of college basketball. From the NAAC to the Pac-12, the WCC to the SWAC. We cover it all now on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Welcome to it on a Monday night as a part of Ticket Weeknights. This is the Corner 3. I am Austin Oerman. You also hear me on the block from 2 to 4 with Eric Strickland. And I'm also behind the board running things for DP&J on Old School from 4 to 6 Central Time. Whether you're listening on our free mobile app for your phone, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or Allo Channel 951, we welcome you to the show. If you have any questions, anything on your mind college basketball related, we are happy to get to it. The number 402-464-5685 to the Sartor Heyman text line. Or again, if you're watching on one of our streams, you can comment right there. If it's on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter, it pops across. We see it, and we will do our best to address it over the course of the next hour and change. 3 topics for today, a few big ones. Number 1 is going to be Chris Collins at Northwestern. Why? Because of everything going down with football and also the baseball program. What is Chris Collins' role in the athletic department? We'll touch on that. The second order of business will be a foreign trip overview. I don't want to call it a recap, and I don't want to call it a preview because one of the foreign trips that we'll go over, Matt's Kentucky Wildcats had a good showing up in Canada, but Nebraska basketball has yet to go to Spain, and Oklahoma State also has a trip coming up. So we'll get Landon's overview of the season for the Pokes, where they're going, what to look forward to. And then we were sharing this tweet around in our group chat last night. The basketball tournament coming back. It's been around since 2014. Fantastic tournament. 64 teams playing for $1 million. Lots of alums of teams or of schools put a team together to participate in this tournament. Kansas's roster came out. We'll go over just how stacked it is. But of course, to keep it topical, to keep it local, we will, of course, build our own Nebraska men's basketball TBT team. So put yours together. Find 8 Husker basketball players that would still be playing, hypothetically playing at their age right now. What's the best current Nebraska basketball TBT team you can come up with? Tweet it at Austin_Oerman or text your players in, at least your starting lineup, to 402-464-5685. We'll get to that in segment number 3 of the show. All right, so diving into the first order of business with Chris Collins at Northwestern. This thought crossed my mind when everything was going down with Pat Fitzgerald in the football locker room, and then Jim Foster in baseball and the clubhouse. Been a really rough week and a half, couple weeks for Northwestern since the allegations first came out on a Friday. Pat Fitzgerald then fired on a Monday. The Jim Foster news came out at the same time. Northwestern had a bigger issue with football on its plate, so the Jim Foster news wasn't necessarily pushed to the side by Northwestern, but it wasn't, as high on the priority list. They had to take care of everything going on with football first. So then the next day, Jim Foster officially let go after just 1 year in charge of Northwestern. And really what that does is it leaves a hole in terms of the face of the Northwestern athletic department. Were Jim Phillips still around, I would make the case he's the face, a well-known guy, been on committees, well-respected, thought to be in the running for Big Ten commissioner. Once Jim Delaney retired, that job goes to Kevin Warren, as we all know, and Jim Phillips leaves Northwestern, his athletic director post, to go out to the ACC to become the ACC commissioner. And things are certainly going for old Jimmy P out there in the ACC. Something's going well, but of course the biggest issue in college sports right now is the money. The ACC is getting left in the dust by the SEC and the Big Ten in terms of their TV deal. So that's what's on Jim Phillips' plate instead of everything going on at Northwestern. I wonder if we'll ever know just how involved he was with anything going on at Northwestern, if any of these allegations had been brought to him previously, or Jim Phillips, who has been gone for a couple years now to be the ACC commissioner, if all of this happened was reported after he left. I'd be curious to find out the answer to that. But that brings me back around to Chris Collins. So some background on Chris Collins. His dad, Doug Collins, really well-known former NBA player, played on the USA Olympic team. Doug Collins from from Illinois, from the Chicago area, Glenbrook North, to be specific. He goes to Duke eventually, All-ACC rookie team after his freshman year, team captain and second team All-ACC in '93. Played in Finland, of all places, professionally for a couple years after he was done at Duke, but then got into coaching. He coached in the WNBA. He was with the Detroit Shock. Nancy Lieberman was the head coach. He went to Seton Hall for a couple years to coach under another former Duke guy in Tommy Amaker. But then after those 2 seasons, 98-99 and 99-2000 at Seton Hall, Chris Collins makes the jump back to Duke. So he's an assistant coach for 8 years, and then he's the associate head coach from 2008 to 2013. Bill Carmody was the guy at Northwestern in March of 2013 before he got fired. Collins brought up pretty quickly after that as a primary target. And yeah, just a few weeks after Carmody was fired, Chris Collins returns home to Illinois, the greater Chicago area, to be the head coach of Northwestern. It's crazy to think that he's been at Northwestern for 10 seasons. You don't think of him as a spring chicken, as one of the new coaches, but he's been at Northwestern for a decade now, and it's been a real mixed bag for Chris Collins. His first couple years, they were below 500. They went 14-19 his first year, 15-17 his second. Made a pretty good run in 2015-16. They end up with 20 wins, don't make the NCAA tournament field, and that's where you start to wonder if the seat's getting hot for Chris Collins, even at a place like Northwestern. But they turn around in the 2016-17 season. They go to the NCAA tournament. They win their first round game before falling to Gonzaga in the second round of the NCAA tournament. If you look up crying Northwestern kid, that picture comes from that game, and that is Jim Phillips' son, actually, is the crying Northwestern kid. But Chris Collins on the board after his 4th season in Evanston. The next year, they start the season ranked in the AP Top 25. They start that season out ranked 19th, but that's as high as they'd get. They'd fall back below 500 on the season to finish at 15-17, and that was the first of 5 straight losing seasons for the Cats. They dropped to 13 wins, then down to single-digit wins across the 2 years impacted by COVID, 8-23 in 2019-20, and then that next season they go 9-15, only getting 24 games in. They did get as high as 19th early in the non-conference slate, but then they fell back off. Another subpar season 2 years ago. They end up a game below 500 before bouncing back last year. I think really between Chase Audige and Boo Buie, they were the engines of that Northwestern team. They make the NCAA tournament. They win a game before bowing out in the second round. Audige is gone, declared for the draft, kept his name in. Boo Buie does return. So Northwestern, I think, will be a minor factor in the Big Ten. I think that's still a top half team, if I had to guess. But I don't think they're anyone I would, take overly seriously for the Big Ten title, quite to the degree that they were in that conversation this year. But again, this conversation is less about Northwestern basketball and more about Chris Collins and his role. With Pat Fitzgerald, who was without a doubt the face of the athletic department, gone, with Jim Phillips having left a few years ago, it falls on Chris Collins. Women's basketball has been up and down. Softball is a good program, but won't ever be in the limelight to the same degree as a basketball or a football program. So to me, with Chris Collins' tenure, with the success he's had last year, to me, he's the face of this athletic department right now. I think you're propping him up as, the guy who's done it the right way, who's built, who's seen his share of struggles in his time at Northwestern. But it's paid off with a couple runs again in year 4 and in year 10, a couple NCAA tournament appearances and a win each time. So I think there's even more responsibility on Chris Collins' plate right now, because there has to be. I don't think there's anyone in that athletic department that is as forward facing as he is right now, especially given his success last year. Does that do anything to change the outlook for Northwestern? I don't know. Again, Chris Collins has been at some big-time programs. Like we mentioned, his dad, even starting off with his dad's career, then you go to Duke, you get a little notoriety, you're a fine player there, and then you jump right into coaching at Seton Hall, which is a solid program. You go to Duke, you're an assistant, you're sitting by Coach K the entirety of your time there, and then you make the jump to a Big Ten school, albeit one without much of any basketball history at all, but you come back home. You come back to the Chicago area to be the head coach. So there is more pressure on Chris Collins right now. Again, I think he's safe. He shouldn't have a hot seat given what he did last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they, like I said, take a slight step back from that, maybe more an NCAA tournament bubble type of team. But Chris Collins, I think, really has to continue to carry that banner for Northwestern athletics for a few years now. I think that it's of paramount importance that he continues to do things, quote unquote, the right way, avoid scandal, avoid issue, impropriety, all those sorts of, negative things, because I don't think Northwestern can afford much more upheaval. As not great as their football team was, Pat Fitzgerald turned it into at least something, and it still brings in money because it's in the Big Ten and it's playing football and it's on TV. Men's basketball earned its share of the pie, right? With an NCAA tournament win. It got a couple of those units for Northwestern, and that's huge. So to me, if I'm the Northwestern administration, I'm doing everything I can to support Chris Collins right now. I'm amplifying that program. Boo Booey's been on campus forever. That's a voice I think I'm amplifying in the community, because that's what you have going for you right now. Plain and simple. So that's what I'll be watching for Northwestern. How does Chris Collins, how does Boo Buie handle that spotlight in Evanston throughout Big Ten play? All right, I'm going to step aside here. You've heard enough of me. We're going to welcome in Matt and Landon after this break. Matt will recap Kentucky's trip up. It confused me every time. They were listed as Team USA in these global games, but it was just Kentucky. So we'll get the rundown on how that went. We'll hear from Landon. He'll tell us about Oklahoma State's upcoming trip. Who's he watching out for? What's the objective of the trip? And then we'll all put our heads together and discuss the Nebraska trip to Spain. That's coming up. They head out on July 28th. We're previewing it now because there won't be a show next week. We'll do all that foreign trip stuff, the overview, when we get back here on the Corner 3.
After me, I will not touch the fuse box.
I will probably not touch the fuse box.
Sip, do you remember what happened last time?
Yeah, I remember.
What happened?
Half of the city block lost power.
And?
My chicken condo went haywire.
That's right. The chickens ran wild. So what do we do instead?
Call Joe at Ambition Electric and let him handle everything. Look, saved on speed dial.
Ambition Electric, 402-217-3415 or online at ambitionelectric.com.
Hi, Sean Callahan here with Koppel Chevrolet GMC, and it is Truck Month at Koppel, and we are pulling out all of the stops for this gigantic event. The lots are starting to fill, and we have some great deals for you waiting in Louisville. Brand new GMC Sierra Light Duty and new Silverado Light Duty trucks. All trim levels have up to $4,000 in discounts. That's right, up to $4,000 off all new light trucks right now at Koppel, so do not wait. Now is the time to buy a new truck, so stop on in or visit us online at koppelcars.com. You must have a trade-in and finance with Koppel. All deals with approved credit.
The best way to learn about Southeast Community College is to visit, and you can check out our spaces before you visit in person with a virtual campus tour, an opportunity to see our campuses in Beatrice, Lincoln, and Milford as you learn about our programs and areas of study. There are virtual tours of our learning centers too. We can even take you on a personalized virtual tour. Learn more on our website, southeast.edu/visit SCC. SCC, your path to possible.
You finally finished your man cave in the basement. Brand new furniture, huge TV, and all of your collector's items. You're ready for football season. You were so excited until one bad rain and it is all ruined. Don't risk a flooded basement and countless dollars in damages when it can be avoided. Call
John Henry's
today for a free sump pump estimate for your home.
435-5555. John Henry's Plumbing. Heating and air.
Nebco is hiring CDL drivers for Ready Mix Concrete, Husker Concrete, and Beatrice Concrete. Nebco offers great pay, medical, and retirement benefits, paid time off, and we pay for CDL training. Apply today to earn an average total compensation of $50,000 to $60,000 your first year driving. From Nebco's beginnings in 1908, it's the employees that have formed the company's solid foundation. Start your career today. Visit nebcoinc.com. That's NEBCOINC.com.
Guys, when I first started with Farrell's Extreme Body Shaping, I weighed in at over 300 pounds. Now, less than a year later, I'm under 200 pounds for the first time since high school. I'm stronger, I'm healthier, and it all began with the Farrell's 10-week challenge. 10 weeks of kickboxing, strength training, and guided nutrition coaching to help you reach your fitness goals. Their next 10-week challenge begins on April 8th. If you're wanting to change your life like I have, head to theticketfm.com and click on Enroll Now on the homepage. Plus, get a promo code for a discount just for ticket listeners. Farrell's Extreme Body Shaping.
Attention all Wings fans. 89-cent wings are back on Tuesdays at Buffalo Wings and Rings in Lincoln. Enjoy the best wings in town for boneless or traditional at a price that makes the whole family happy. And now at the Williamsburg Village Wings and Rings, you can enjoy $1.50 tall boys in Bud Light, Coors Light, Busch Light, and Michelob Ultra every day after 7 p.m. and all day on Sundays. Get to Wings and Rings today and make sure to stop by on Tuesdays for 89-cent wings.
If you're in Lincoln, Waverly, or the surrounding area, listen up. Select Plumbing gets it right the first time on a variety of issues for your home and business, including general plumbing, water heaters, faucet and fixture repair, underground sewer and water repairs, backflow testing, and more. Keep your property free from leaks and other issues. Call today for a free estimate at 402-560-6197. Plus, they're hiring service plumbers. If you're in Lincoln, Waverly, or the surrounding area, contact Select Plumbing to inquire at 402-560-6197.
Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
That's right. We're back here on the Corner 3, 93.7 The Ticket, and theticketfm.com. Also streaming worldwide, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, as well as Allo Channel 951. If you're an Allo subscriber, definitely fire that up. We're excited to have Allo be on board here with 93.7 The Ticket. Still hoping to get that switched over to channel 937 at some point. But we welcome in the fellas, Matt and Landon, here on the Corner 3. We're jumping into foreign tours, gents. I had you guys prep for this because, Matt, you have one to recap for us. Landon, rocking the UTSA hat again. You have one to preview for us. Let's start with the recap. Matt, Kentucky at Global Jam, representing Team USA, I guess. What was that all about?
So, fun fact, actually, you mentioned that as kind of the tease going into the break, and that got me thinking, this wasn't the first time Kentucky's rep Team USA, so I kind of went down a Wikipedia rabbit hole during the break, and in 1948, Kentucky won the NCAA championship and then represented Team USA in the Olympics in London. But I looked up that 1948 Olympic basketball team, and it was kind of a merger between Kentucky and this like semi-pro-ish team called the Phillips 66ers, which was like, I don't know, whatever they had for people after college to play basketball in before the NBA and ABA started. And this Phillips 66ers was like based out of a small town in the middle of Oklahoma and had several Oklahoma State alums or players on it as well. So yeah, it was kind of fun fact that Landon and I's teams kind of combined to, lead Team USA to gold and right after winning World War II there. So
yeah, that would have been like the golden era of Oklahoma State basketball in like the 1940s. I believe that was the decade in which, then Oklahoma A&M won its two national championships. That was like the peak, the pinnacle. So yeah. I'm sure that.
And there was also, looking at the roster, there was a guard from Baylor named Jackie Robinson, whose his real first name is Robert, but then his name was Robert Jackson Robinson, and he went by Jackie Robinson. So surely there was no confusion there. And he also, I see on Wikipedia, just died last February at a ripe young age of 94. So rest in peace, Jackie Robinson.
Okay, you bring up Phillips 66ers. Landon, as a kid that grew up in the Midwest, I assume you grew up watching the Big 12 on ABC, sponsored by Phillips 66.
Yes, and the Big 12 used to kind of sort of have a network kind of.
Yeah.
Back in like that era, like 2004, 5 to like 2010 or 11. Those are some great commercials. You got the Phillips 66 ones are really good. Motel 6, those were really good. And Whataburger.
Great.
Those were the days for those three brands because those would be on every commercial break.
I never got Whataburger up here in Lincoln.
Really?
I didn't get that in Wisconsin.
They did in Kansas, and they haven't been here until like just now when Patrick Mahomes like has purchased franchisees and put them in Kansas City. But before then, no, Whataburger was not in Kansas, at least nowhere around where I live. But yeah, those would be on too. But yes, Motel 6 and Phillips 66. That's like the holy grail of those old like Big 12 network commercials.
It was a big moment in my childhood when I think I had to get straight A's or something in elementary school, and then my parents decided to buy ESPN Full Court on DirecTV so I could watch all those out of market college basketball games. And yes, ingrained in my mind is like and keep in mind I had like no ties to Nebraska, but that like half semicircle basketball at the free throw line and the Phillips 66 logo and like the ESPN graphic. And yes, so many Phillips 66 commercials that just hit all of the nostalgia for me.
That's incredible. Take us through Canada, Kentucky and Canada.
Well, going in, it was kind of like expectations were pretty low. I mean, they barely had the team was 6 players just a few weeks ago. Then they make a few additions. They had Jordan Burks from one of those overtime elite prep schools. They added Joey Hart, who didn't even really play in this trip. And then they added Trey Mitchell from West Virginia. Just 2 weeks ago, they added him. And then also got good news that Antonio Reeves was coming back. So they only had 10 days to practice with a team of mostly freshmen in a U23 tournament. So the Global Jam is some new thing they're doing up in Canada. I think it's annual now. It was in Toronto. Last year, Baylor represented the United States in it and went 1-4 in it and lost the gold medal game somehow. So expectations were low, but then I looked at that Team Canada. I don't even remember who. Brazil won the event last year. Don't know who was on their team, but Team Canada had Marcus Carr and Leonard Miller, so future NBA players. But this year's team, it was just a lot of these other teams were like players from mid-major schools. Like a guy, one of the Canada guys was the America East Defensive Player of the Year at Maine. So it wasn't as loaded, but still barely had any time to practice. It's a young team. And also Peach Jam was last week, as Austin talked about. So all of the assistants were pretty much out in Atlanta or Augusta and elsewhere doing recruiting last week. So they didn't really, like Cal said, they didn't even install any defense. They only worked on offense, but vibes are much higher after watching them. So yeah, they played 4 games and they won all 4 fairly easily. They beat a German team. And I forgot to mention that also they have 2 big men on this roster, 3 now with Trey Mitchell. Trey Mitchell played, but Aaron Bradshaw got surgery and is out for 6 weeks or 6 months, something like that. He'll be ready by October, they're saying. And then in a scrimmage the night before the first game, Ugana Onyenzo, their sophomore center who reclassified and really didn't play much last year, but expectations are kind of high for him this year. Hurt his ankle really bad and apparently might be needing surgery on that. So that's a tough blow, but he did not get to play in any of the games that were on TV. So they beat Germany, a German team on Wednesday in the first game. Then they blew out Canada, those 2 are probably the 2 best teams. And then they beat the African select team, which they blew them out in a scrimmage before this whole thing. And then they added 3 new players, and Africa actually gave them a pretty good run in the second half and got the game down within 4 or 6 points before Kentucky kind of pulled away and held on. And then in the gold medal match, Canada put up a good fight, but Kentucky led from start to finish. So all in all, it was good it's always good just to see your team play in the summer. get acquainted with some new faces and, get reacquainted with some of the guys you liked from last year that are back. So it was fun to spend a few days this week watching Kentucky basketball on TV. It was on CBS Sports Network.
You were blowing up our group chat with one name and one name only. Reed Shepherd. Describe him.
Yeah, Reed Shepherd was someone, he's kind of 2-3 years ago, he was the most important recruit available in this class because he's from Kentucky. Cal wasn't getting a lot of these Kentucky kids. He just kind of overlooked them. And his dad was he was a Final Four most outstanding player for Kentucky in the 1998 NCAA tournament when they won their second to last title. And his mom was like a really good basketball player too. So he was blowing up on the high school ranks. Virginia was recruiting him hard. So he was one of those like must get guys. But then, as DJ Wagner rose to prominence, Rob Dillingham decommitted from NC State, and then, Aaron Bradshaw, he was kind of the forgotten guy of, well, he probably won't play that much this year, but he'll be a big piece developmental wise for a few years. But he stole the show. He was all 3 or 4 games. He was very impressive. He didn't make a shot in the first game, but then he just blew up in the second and third games. And he ended up averaging around 9 points per game, but also had like 2 blocks per game, 6 assists per game. So he was blocking 3-point shots. He had one highlight where he blocked a dude's 3-point shot and then took the ball and went coast to coast. He had very nice passing. And I said in the group chat last night, his skill set and athleticism does make you think of Grayson Allen without some of the, the tripping and
Grayson Allen parts.
Who knows? Like maybe that'll happen come the regular season, but yeah, no, he was kind of one of the big revelations of this trip. There was rumors that he was, playing well in the summer workouts, but to see him do it in a game, especially against, as an 18-year-old against a lot of, 21 to 23-year-olds on these other teams, it was pretty impressive. And they were frustrated that this 18-year-old kid from middle of nowhere Kentucky was just kind of dominating them at times.
If he's anything like Grayson Allen, he'll have his moment in the Final Four. So just keep that in mind.
Well, his dad was the most outstanding player in the Final Four, and also he avenged the 1992 Duke-Kentucky game by hitting a three that gave Kentucky the lead after trailing by 18 in the second half against Duke in the Elite Eight. So a little bit of connection between our two teams, Austin, there. Not as nice as
Oh, no, not nearly as friendly. I wasn't alive for it, though. That predates me. So my hands are clean of it. Anything else that stands out to you about Canada before we preview a couple trips?
Yeah, I should probably talk about the guy that eventually was named the most outstanding player of this event, and that was Antonio Reeves. We talked about it.
Best player available at transfer portal, Antonio Reeves.
There's a reason Jeff Goodman has him listed as the best player available in the transfer portal currently. Someone's going to get a really good player in him, and I think it might be Kentucky. Call me crazy. We talked about it in the Kentucky episode where I didn't really see the importance in him, but I kind of didn't value as much the fact of, he'd be in his second year at Kentucky. He'd be used to, the level of competition. He did finish last year strong. And he led them in scoring. He made 18. He shot 56% from 3. He was 18 for 32, was scoring 23 points per game. Only game he didn't get over 20 was, I think he got in foul trouble in yesterday's gold medal game. So he was a revelation. Also, I wanted to mention Landon's scouting report of Trey Mitchell was spot on. He's a guy that when you're in a little bit of a rut, you go to him and he'll either get you an open 3, a little jump hook, or go to the rim. Defensively, little bullish on him. Still, there's work to be done, but offensively, that's an intriguing piece that I'm fascinated to see. But I think just as a whole, the big takeaway, also DJ Wagner looked very good. You can tell, that's an NBA level talent. But But as a whole, the offense, I think part of it was having 0 big men available. But the fact of the matter was they took 117 3-point attempts over 4 games. They were playing a much more modern style than Cal's teams have played in recent years. And I think part of that is they do have so many ball handlers. I mean, you've got Antonio Reeves, DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepard played a little bit of point. In emergency situations, Adu Thiero even can play points. So just having that many options, they're going to play with a lot more spacing, and hopefully the style continues into the regular season. But they've got some shooters, and Aaron Bradshaw apparently is another guy that he's supposedly a 7-footer with some range if he can get healthy by the regular season.
I heard that about Derek Lively. Didn't really see it. Good
yeah,
4-0.
That's why I'm skeptical.
You never believe high school guys will transition to be good shooters in college until you actually see it. That's my general rule of thumb. Good 4-0 trip. Yeah. Good 4-0 trip up to Canada for Kentucky. All right, let's do the previews now. Landon, heading over to you. Oklahoma State and Nebraska basketball. Probably not crossing paths in Spain, but that's where the Pokes are headed. What's on your docket? What are you watching out for with the Pokes up there?
Yeah, super quick, RE Kentucky. I'm glad you mentioned Adu Thiero right at the end, because as someone that kind of just took in what Kentucky did through clips and articles and highlights on Twitter, that's a guy that really, really interests me just like as an overall talent. I looked back because the name wasn't familiar to me. I know we talked about him before, but a guy that barely played last year, that is a very, very interesting player to like watch his development throughout this season. Is he going to carve out a little bit of a niche? That's a guy that like could be a potential like first round talent. Like there's a lot there, and his body seems to be still developing too from like the accounts that I read Kyle Tucker's piece in The Athletic, just that sort of summarized the trip. So not necessarily probably this year, but maybe next year. That's a guy I'm super curious to watch. And also Trey Mitchell being awesome in the high post, seeing clips of that was super cool too, because that's the guy. But for Oklahoma,
nice it's not happening to your team.
yeah, it's really nice. But on the Oklahoma State, I guess sort of front, it's interesting because obviously the trip's been announced for a couple of months now that they're going to Spain. These sort of foreign trips, at least trips like the ones Oklahoma State and Nebraska are going on, are ones that are generally done every 4 to 5 years. The pandemic sort of threw a wrench in that, which is why a lot of teams are finally able to go now and why there are so many happening this summer, because COVID kind of messed a lot of things up and a lot of international travel. So yes, Oklahoma State is also going to Spain. I don't know who they're going to be playing. That hasn't been announced yet. I tried to do some digging on that, and the best thing I could find was it's happening, from this window to this window, nothing else. So I'm sure that there are probably some things that are still being finalized on that front. But as far as some things I'm looking out for, first, my fun fact. So like, as I mentioned, these trips aren't super common, but Oklahoma State in 2012, they went under Boynton in 2018 as well. I think that was his second year or first year. But before then, the last time they went on a foreign trip was in 2012. They went to Spain, and that was another year where they were bringing in a talented freshman recruiting class, 2 talented freshmen in particular being Marcus Smart and Phil Forte. So it's funny now, 11 years later, Oklahoma State is going back to Spain. I can't remember if they had a top 10 recruiting class when they brought in Smart and Forte. I'm sure they were probably pretty close. But it's just funny that like 11 years later now, they're going back to Spain. They have a top 10 recruiting class, and that's just how this is shaking out. So that's just like a funny little parallel. Probably means nothing, but I just thought that was like an interesting little tidbit. Just like, there you go. That was that year. Because
that 2012 class was ranked 42nd.
Well, the one headliner there probably, because I was looking through the rest of the roster. I'm like, their recruiting class kind of was just Marcus Smart and Phil Forte and nothing else. But as far as
Mari Murphy and Kirby Gardner, but Marcus Smart is the only one with any stars at all, and he had 5 of them.
Yeah, well, Forte became a nice college player, but
Phil Forte got no love there.
But for what I'm curious to see, I'm really excited to see Isaiah Miranda. That's number one for me. I could talk a lot about the freshmen, which Obviously, trips like this serve to benefit them the most ultimately. But Isaiah Miranda is kind of basically sort of a freshman. He's got a really very weird basketball journey that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier on in the summer. But it's a guy that was a top 60 recruit, ESPN top 60 recruit, left high school early, went to NC State, enrolled early last winter/spring, practiced with the team, didn't play in a game. Then after the season, put his name in the NBA draft, went through the pre-draft process, got feedback from teams, and then put his name in the transfer portal and left and went to Oklahoma State. So he hasn't played a college basketball game despite being in, the program for quite some time. And he fills a very obvious need that Oklahoma State has right now, which is interior depth. Brandon Garrison is McDonald's All-American, but I do think that it will take him a couple of months at least to adjust to the college game, and even more time than that to adjust to what should be a crazy Big 12. And they also picked up Mike Marsh in the transfer portal, who's literally just a big guy for depth. But Isaiah Miranda could, theoretically work his way into a starting lineup spot here. And I'm really curious to see. The dude hasn't played much actual live basketball, it doesn't seem like, in the past year. So I'm really interested to see how he looks. I don't know, like I said, who Oklahoma State's going to be playing against, but working him into the rotation is going to be, and working him into the fold, because he's a guy that came, so late on in the summer. He was the last addition OSU made, I'm pretty sure. So seeing how he sort of fits in is going to be something I'm curious to monitor and follow, as well as, point number 2 is who's going to stand out as Oklahoma State's alpha top scorer. My problem with Mike Boynton's offense in Oklahoma State basketball in general, basically since Cade Cunningham has left, has been the lack of a primary scorer and a lack of a guy to really turn to consistently when the offense isn't flowing and be like, go get a bucket. Bryce Thompson, I've been waiting on Bryce Thompson to become that for the last couple of years, but it just hasn't quite happened yet. But he's someone I'm definitely monitoring to see, his aggression and his, assertiveness as far as the offense goes. They brought back John Michael Wright, who kind of sort of also was that guy for stretches. For Oklahoma State, he was a mid-major transfer. He started out at High Point. He played last year, averaged, I think, just under 10 points a game, but he would go off in spurts, but that consistency wasn't there. And they picked up someone in the transfer portal, Javon Small from East Carolina, who was that guy. He, I think, was around 19 and a half points a game for an East Carolina team that I don't think was very good. I don't remember, but there's no way they won more than like 14 games in the AAC. But that is a guy that at the very least is comfortable with the ball in his hands and working in isolation. And I'm also, this isn't more of an observation, just a talking point. Eric Daly's having a really huge summer. He was with the United States under-19 team when they were doing, I believe that was the FIBA under-19 World Cup. Mike Boynton, I think, was on that coaching staff too, but Eric Daly was playing in that. He got consistent minutes. He was pouring in double-digit points almost every game, but playing a lot. So this is just a really big summer for him. And I think of the freshmen, he's definitely ready to contribute the most right away, just because of all this really high level competitive basketball that he has under his belt from his time, at the U19 championships, and then to this trip to Spain. So I think of that crew, I'm expecting him to, take that big leap first. And I think that, this big summer he's having is a big reason why.
A lot of new faces, a lot of new pieces coming in. That's kind of the norm in college basketball. How does Boynton do with the culture piece, the getting guys to fit together aspect of it?
That's difficult. And I think that's honestly a big portion of why now is the right time to make this trip. John Rothstein put out actually this afternoon of just randomly returning scoring production to the Big 12. Oklahoma State is somewhere close to the bottom. It's not all the way in last, but it's 10th or 11th or maybe 9th at the highest. Things like this are critical for maintaining team chemistry. There are a lot of new faces. It's Bryce Thompson and John Michael Wright and a couple of reserves and Keon Williams. That's kind of it. A good portion of Oklahoma State's contributors are going to come from that freshman class and the transfer portal. There, to my knowledge, hasn't been, I feel like, this much turnover in Boynton's tenure And maybe that's a good thing for him this year in Oklahoma State. Some of the consistency hasn't necessarily fared well. And, OSU did lose a fair bit, guys that were around for a while, but I feel like maybe having the opportunity to essentially have as close to a fresh slate as he's had probably since his first year, might not be the worst thing in the world for the program heading into a pretty critical season for him this year. So I don't know. I'm excited to see how he's going to manage rotations, manage these guys, but maybe, a change in what an offseason looks like going into the season won't be the worst thing for Oklahoma State basketball.
It's funny looking at Oklahoma State needing some change, and then the other two programs that are represented on this show needing some stability, right? Duke and Kentucky out in front of a lot of the one and dones, but their big thing has been, can we get some continuity? It's funny to see the teams heading in a little opposite direction, but to your point, Landon, about that, it just felt kind of stale for Oklahoma State last year. And some of that, is the offense not being up to snuff. I mean, the 3-point shooting wasn't good. Is there any hope for that this year? Are there any tweaks in place that you know of, or is it just hope they shoot better?
Well, that aspect, Oklahoma State has opted to go in the mid-major route to try and fix this. It hasn't really gone very well. I believe it was the Cade Cunningham tournament team. I was really excited about Fair and Flavors, who was a guy they picked up from Cal Baptist that brings in a similar shooting profile to the guy they picked up out of the transfer portal this year from a mid-major school, Jarius Hicklin from North Florida. Hicklin's like a 38% shooter. So that I don't think has changed. They're going to hope that the freshman can come in and make some threes. Hope John Michael Wright, because he was a pretty good shooter at High Point, but he really struggled. So the hope is that my hope is that, after a second year in the Big 12, how fast the game's going to be, the quality of looks you're going to get. I'm hoping that will only help out his confidence. And then you hope that Jarius Hicklin can maybe shoot, 34, 35%. But that element, that has not changed. They're going to hope that the mid-major transfer that has experience scoring the ball can come in and do that, and hope that the guys they have take a lead. But it is very reasonable to expect, with the basis of what I just said, for a guy like John Michael Wright to improve as a shooter, because he came in with that pedigree but wasn't consistent enough from outside last year.
Gotcha. Matt, anything on Oklahoma State you want to add or ask?
Yeah, I want to see these freshmen. So please blow up the group chat with any highlights you're getting, because I'm all ears for them. Like, especially some of these big guys like Eric Daly or Brandon Garrison. So I'm excited for that. And I think just as a whole, it can be valuable to do trips like this. And it's also important that the results don't always matter. The last time Kentucky lost on one of these trips was the 2015 38-1 team lost to the Dominican Republic select team in like their 6th game down in the Bahamas. And then they didn't lose again until the Final Four. So I know plenty of these teams. I remember last year, Auburn famously lost to the Israeli team. It was on the SEC network, and the Israeli people were like doing the Auburn thing and in the mentions of the final score tweet from Auburn. That was a great summer basketball moment that I remember. But I hope that they're fun and that they have highlights. I think with the amount of transfers and just talented players, this is going to be a good team building trip for them. And I'm fascinated to see what teams they end up playing, because I feel like, especially with how many teams are going on these trips, especially to like Spain and Italy, I'm fascinated to see what teams become available and what players, because it can get pretty makeshift. And I'm sure, especially like, it's one thing when you're playing Duke and Kentucky or Oklahoma State, but like Harvard's going to Canada, things like that. Who are you going to find that wants to come play Harvard? So fascinated to see that.
Landon, any final thoughts on your pokes before we turn over to Nebraska ball?
No, I believe I've said my piece, so I'm all good.
Excellent. Okay, so Nebraska basketball heading over to Spain, their last foreign trip. First year of Fred Hoiberg. They go to Italy. Italian Luca Virgilio set up a lot of that, did his thing. But they're going to Spain. Tim Miles took a team to Spain closer to the end of his tenure a few years before that. Nebraska won its first 3 games in Italy. I dug for the results of that 4th game, and it's apparently been lost to the ages, which is a bummer. Oh, they did? Okay, so 4-0.
Because they won all those, and then they didn't. I think they won as many games there as they did the rest of the year.
They won as many there. They won more than they did in Big Ten play. Yes. We know that much, at least, which is kind of insane. But there are 2 things that stick out to me for what I'm going to be watching for Nebraska basketball on this trip. The first one is pace. That's something that Strick and I have talked a lot about on the block dating back to last season. Nebraska didn't always know when to push the ball ahead, when to get out and transition with numbers, and when to slow it down. They really slowed it down. And that's fine, except that the offensive execution in the half court was far from flawless. It was not exactly a well-oiled machine at all times. So the nights that Nebraska looked good, it's because the movement was there. Guys were engaged, energetic on offense. They were whirling dervishes, as it were, around Walker in the high post, Griesel in the low post, backing someone down with his old man YMCA game, which I still love. Shouts to Sam at the Summer League in Vegas with the Celtics. But Nebraska needs to push it more. I still don't completely buy the half-court execution this year, especially with the new faces as they work their way in. Nebraska is not even stealing easy points, but take the easy points that are available, right? Make that one extra pass Michigan State style up the floor. Move it up that way. That's not to say take the first available shot. You save that for Casey on a heater. But if you can get the ball in the front court, put some pressure on the rim, that goes a long way. And I don't think Nebraska did enough of that. So I hope that Fred has coached them to find a balance between what he wanted to do his first couple of years and then the way they slowed it down last year.
Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated just to see. I mean, it's really unfortunate that Casey, he's getting great experience playing for Team Japan again, but it's unfortunate that he won't be a part of this team, because I feel like you can't just tell someone else to go do what Casey does. It won't end well. It'll drive everyone insane. So the offense is going to be different, and you lose a lot of value in this trip by not having one of, if not your most important player back. So but still, I think it'll be I'm excited to see some of the development opportunities on this trip.
And Rink Mast has been selected to the Netherlands camp.
Yep, he's gone too, right?
And that is that a guy then I'm assuming that also won't be available for that trip. Yeah, that is a big bummer because of the transfers. I was sort of most excited about him and his skill set. I've talked about it a lot. He reminds me a lot of college Iowa State George Niang. And the international basketball experience is good, but it also is a different game, playing FIBA rules, shot clock shorter. There's some goaltending rules. It is awesome. Shot clock shorter, weird goaltending rules. So that is, I will have to side with Matt. Honestly, that is something that has been, it's a bit of a bummer because you said it. Casey is probably going to be the most important player on this roster. But to go a little bit off of what you said, Austin, earlier, the offense last year felt like a bit of organized chaos at times. There really wasn't much. I mean, it's kind of like lazy to say almost, but it felt like there really just wasn't much rhyme or reason. Like there really just wasn't much explaining it. It would just kind of operate at times in whatever, manner felt good at the time. So some consistency there would be nice, and sort of the implementation of the evolution of what Fred Hoiberg basketball has been about, because he's had to go through some changes from what worked at Iowa State. So I'm curious to see what this what the offseason has brought about for him, and what changes he makes to how Nebraska will play. But yeah, it really is disappointing that you can't get a full look at everything.
I will say though, I think probably the most important factor or thing that'll come out of this trip, going back, you don't have 2 starters available that have other national team commitments. I kind of question why if they knew this was coming, maybe it was planned for too long in advance, but it's why not push this back a year or something? Duke hasn't done one of these trips since Zion and RJ were coming in. So it's not like you have to do it every 4 years. But I think it's going to be important to see, how Aaron Eulis looks on this team, because one thing that I kind of took away from listening to some of John Calipari's press conferences over the last few weeks, besides the fact that he was butchering the Lil Wayne lyrics, saying like, "Oh, Lil Wayne told me real G's move in silence like lasagna." He butchered that like 4 times. But he also had a prediction that with all these foreign trips and with the current state of the transfer portal, he's predicting at least 10 or more grad transfers by the end of this summer. And by guys just not happy with their playing time, starting to be, unsure of their situation, things like that. And then they, of course, finish their summer classes and are able to hit the portal if they graduate over the summer. So Eulis kind of does, like, he can really stake a claim to the point guard spot and, make Fred and the crew feel better about it. And if things are a little sketchy, then they might be pursuing some grad transfer point guards after this trip. So I think that's a big piece where you don't normally, it's almost like you're a professional athlete, like, you have to perform or you're cut sort of deal, where it's like you have to perform or you'll be replaced even before your first season starts.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought Eulis up, because I think he starts. I really do, especially with Casey out. I think he's going to be one of those guys that Fred Hoiberg trusts enough to start. But that leads me into the second thing I'm going to be watching, and that's the young guards. We went over this in one of our first episodes, just how many there are on the roster. I'm curious to see how many of them Fred Hoiberg is comfortable playing together. I'm curious to see who's taken a developmental step, who's in charge of handling the ball, because Keisei Tominaga is going to play more off ball. He'll have the ball in his hands a ton, but I don't think he's running the point. Jamarcus Lawrence did some really good stuff, especially as the year went on. Has he continued to grow as a shooter? Sam Hoiberg, what does he bring? Is he the same guy? Has he added, anything to his game, or is he just Mr. Reliable off the bench? Ramel Lloyd Jr., he's in studio with us. It looks good, looks in shape. I've seen the mixtape. It's redonkulous. He's played with high-level talent before. That's a guy I'm excited for, but he hasn't done it on the court yet. So there's a lot of young guards. Then you add in CJ Wilcher, who I think is best at the 2. Does he slide up to the 3 to get some of his minutes? And then it ties into pace as well. Nebraska isn't huge. Nebraska is not also overly athletic. With all the guards and wings that they have, without a true big man outside of, Blaise Keita, Mass is a little undersized to play the 5 long term. Is Nebraska aggressive on defense? Do they have their guards get up in opposing ball handlers and wings to try to force those turnovers to lead to runouts? Because without Emmanuel Bandamel at the point of attack, with Juwan Gary working his way back from injury, and Blaise Keita as a charge taker, not necessarily a rim protector, Nebraska has to do something to make opponents uncomfortable, unless they prove they can operate defensively in the half court. But like I said, with the young guards, they've got to go out and show it again.
Blaise Keita is another guy where I almost would say, the line for when you have your baseball teams like clinched a postseason spot and you just got to, or like at the end of spring training, the bubble wrap line of like, how much do we really need to see of him? Like, let's not risk him getting potentially injured on this trip. Not to speak that into existence or anything, but knock on wood. But I did just see 2 big men get hurt over this offseason, and he's a guy they really need him to, stay healthy at least at the beginning of this year if they don't add more grad transfers up front either.
Anything else on Nebraska basketball in Spain from either of you?
I'm just excited to see the Hoiberg bump for Ramel Lloyd Jr. That's something I talked about earlier in the summer too. Coach Hoiberg has a very, very good track record with these sit-out transfers, as they were in the age before NIL and immediate eligibility and all of that. And Ramel Lloyd is kind of almost Isaiah Miranda-ish in a way, in a sense that he's just sat there and developed. But of course, Lloyd's been in the program for longer than that. And, Fred's got a great track record with getting guys that have literally sat and not played basketball and just sat there and developed and practiced and learned. for them to be quite valuable contributors. I mean, heck, Delano Banton was one of those guys, and he's just, signed a nice contract with the Boston Celtics. So I'm excited to see what Ramel Lloyd brings to the table when he finally, gets the training wheels off, so to speak, and really gets to start flying around in Hoiberg's system.
Yeah, I'm excited to get my first look at him too. And I mean, I haven't seen the mixtape yet, so I'm just going to be pleasantly surprised when I don't know if I'll get to. I'm sure there'll be highlights, but if I have to wait until those BTN Plus exhibitions or whatever, like I'm excited to see what he's got.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left. We got to be out of here by 8 to get too hard of a Husker with Rashawn Jackson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my Nebraska basketball TBT team. Tell me if I got it right or who you'd replace. So I went 3 guards, 3 wings, and 2 big men for my roster breakdown. My guards, I have Lance Jeter, who's one of my all-time favorites. Dude's a stud, criminally underrated, kind of the Levante David of Nebraska basketball in some ways. I have Glenn Watson Jr. because he's fun. We need a guy like that on this team. Love me some Glenn. And then Ade Daganduro. It was between him and Sek Henry for that last spot. I leaned Ade. I think he was a little better defender, all Big 12 type of guy. On the wing, I have longtime pro over in Europe, Jason DeRusso. He's a stud, represents Nebraska well in a couple foreign leagues, even got his number retired by one of his teams. I got Siobhan Shields, again, another one of my personal favorites, a guy that's playing some good basketball overseas. This is probably going to be the most controversial inclusion. I'm going to throw Lat Mayen on my team. I really am. There are other guys I considered, but if Lat just knows his job is to park in the corner and shoot and be adequate on defense, I think he's a decent 3-and-D wing option that Nebraska didn't have a lot of. So I know it's Lat Mayen, but I'm a sucker for that archetype. I went with them. And then my bigs aren't huge, so I think we're going to play some Miami ball. I got Walter Pitchford and Isaac Copeland.
No D Walker.
Yeah, I was going to
say he's busy with the tryout, so.
Yeah. Okay. It seems like some ex-G Leaguers or ex-Summer League players, like literally dudes that were just coming off of Summer League rosters, are playing in this. Like I saw Eric Stevenson, who's at West Virginia for a couple of years. He's playing on West Virginia's alumni team. So I think if you can find a way to squeeze like Derek Walker, and if Sam Breesel would go for it too, those would be 2 great guys for a Nebraska TBT team. But I do like your list. You went way older. I kind of just like jotted down some recent guys that I thought might be cool.
Yeah, same.
Like Shamil Stevenson would be fun. He's playing some good overseas basketball too. He's a nice like archetypal, big athletic wing that would be fun. Who else? I was kind of surprised no Thor Love, but like I feel like the story of Nebraska basketball, at least recently, like that's a guy that has been around even longer than some of the players I mentioned earlier. So he would just be, a good vibes guy as he was, and he's also a fine basketball player and doing well overseas. I'm trying to think if there are any others, though, that you didn't mention. I wrote down Ty Webster, which I know is a little bit before time.
I had him.
He's playing in Australia, I think, which is one of the more...
he's from New Zealand.
Yeah, it's one of the more competitive. Basketball over there is one of the more competitive leagues in the world. So that's one. But other than that, it's a solid list. I'm very excited. And I talked about this with you both off the air, but I'm quite sad. I believe of our 3 schools, Oklahoma State was the only one that sort of kind of had a team going. And they were in it for a couple of years. But last season they were slated to be in it right before 2022, and they dropped out at the last second. And it was a bummer because it doesn't look like they've recirculated for this year. So that made me sad. It was always a nice way to keep up with like former OSUers, and they had some other like schools mix into, but it was nice to like just see, what those guys were up to, where they were playing, and for them to play basketball again. So that's been sad, very sad boy hours. But anybody else, Matt, that I missed?
I made a list. Glenn Watson was also on my list, so good call there. I got a couple other kind of random guards that, would be kind of fun to see what they would do. I kind of went on the younger side with them. Emmanuel Bandamel, if he's healthy, that'd be fun. Also, why not Alonzo Verge?
Sure. Sure, why not? Why not, Alonzo?
At the 2, I had a couple. I think a big one we left off was James Palmer Jr.
Yeah,
He's been playing overseas for a while now. I had one kind of ridiculous one at the 2. Kobe King. Finally get to see him play for Nebraska in some sort. I have no idea what he's up to, but it's like put him on this team.
Oh, he's at Valpo still, I think.
He's still in college?
I believe so.
No way.
That was
Okay,
last year.
No,
this is
Trey
just
McGowan would be fun. I liked. Sorry, what was that?
Derailed the ending of this show. I've got to know now.
A couple other ones I had. Trey McGowan's would be a fun one. I liked Isaac Copeland as well. Tanner Borkhardt, I think I don't know if he still plays basketball or not, but he would be kind of a fun one. And then, you do have to put in like Brant Banks and Noah Vedral as well. If you're like have them on the bench in the headbands, get them ready. Also, one more chaos one that would absolutely rule, even though he technically transferred away, but put Teddy Allen on the team.
Yep. Teddy Allen was on my list. The other guys that I had, Ed Morrow, I didn't know if he counted. For Nebraska. I'm a big Ed Morrow guy. Benny Parker, Kansas City's finest, put him on the team. And also Brandon Ubell, Husker legend. So that's where I ended up. Gentlemen, we got to get out of here. We got Vershawn Jackson coming up. Thanks as always for your time. For Matt and Landon, I am Austin. This has been the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. We got Heart of a Husker with Vershawn Jackson coming your way in just a sec. I'll talk to you tomorrow on the block from 2 to 4, but we keep it going with Ticket Weeknights. VJ, next.